Hi, everyone. Thanks for showing up, especially as the schedule kept shifting around. This is a panel discussion focusing on voice assistants and AI. I'm Ian Jacobs. I am a principal analyst at Forrester, and my research focuses lately on chatbots, voice assistants, virtual assistants, whatever you want to call that world. That's what our customers are very excited to talk about. Makes sense why there are so many of you here. I was joking with the panel that we missed an opportunity. We should have had somebody from Twilio do something very simple, like design an Alexa dialogue where I could ask Alexa to introduce the panelists, but I'm going to bring up the panelists and they're going to have to introduce themselves. To make things a little bit confusing, we have two mics. The clicker, there we go. So Mike, Pat, and Uday, come on up. Take a seat. And no, you do not have to sit in the order of your photos up there. I think the audience can figure out who you are just fine. So we're going to start at the end and have the panelists introduce themselves and their companies, and then we're going to dive into a discussion. We're leaving about 15 minutes at the end of the session for you guys to grill the panel with whatever you guys wanted to talk about as well. But why don't we start with you, Mike?
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mike Marquette with Call Review. If you've ever called a car dealership, you've heard this call is being recorded for quality assurance. We did record it, we did listen to it, and we understood what you spoke about.
Hey, this is Uday. I'm the CEO of Bond.ai. So we created an empathy-based conversational AI platform, and we focus on banks.
This one on? Yeah. Hi, my name's Mike McMurray. I'm the CEO of a company called Chatative, and we're a little different, I guess, than some of the other members of the panel. We're a intelligent text messaging service focusing on enabling conversational messaging across the mobile customer lifecycle.
Hi, I'm Pat Higbee, CEO and co-founder of Zap Media. We have the leading voice AI platform with over 1,000 apps that are live on Alexa and Google Assistant. And this is for brands like Toyota, Walmart, and the like.
All right, well, thanks everyone. We're going to break our conversation into three sections. The first one is kind of what's going on now, what are the current trends. We promised you some best practices, so we're going to do that. And then at the end, we're all going to get out our crystal ball and make some predictions about what the future is going to bring. But because we're starting with something so broad in our title as voice assistants and AI, why don't we talk about the trends that you're actually seeing, not necessarily about AI, but potentially that, about the change in the way that customers are interacting with the brands that they do business with and they interact with. How are you seeing that change? And again, if it's AI and voice assistants, great, but let's take a broader view to start. So why don't we start with you, Uday? Yes. You're holding a mic.
Yeah,
so.
Sure. I think what we are seeing is people are speaking more and clicking less, right? That's what we are seeing. So people really want to have a dialogue with every of their brand. So we've seen, conversational interfaces have taken over social media, and now, everybody's talking about voice, because I think while speaking, you need not articulate anything, and it's very natural to a human, so it's very easy to someone to communicate to someone else. So I think we are definitely seeing where we don't want any interfaces in between us and what we want to communicate, and voice is definitely a medium where you can communicate easily without any problems and convey it to your brand.
So what are you seeing going the other way when, for example, an airline wants to have you change your seat, right? They're not going to try and do that necessarily through a dialogue.
Right.
So it's
but
more
at least,
of a mix?
Yeah, it's definitely more of a mix, but this is an era of mass personalization, right? So while the consumer speaks to you, the brand actually calibrates what you need, and they can actually respond in any other medium. So we're calling it an omnichannel medium, right? So they have to, once they speak to you, they understand, and they can communicate back in any omnichannel way they want.
Okay. Mike? You're holding the mic, so you're holding the mic.
From our standpoint, so we work very much with brands, and so from a brand conversation, I'd say that, as Uday said, the consumer shift has happened where consumers are spending every day text messaging. They're starting to use voice interfaces. But the business to customer communication, it still actually feels like in some cases it's 20 years old, where you're using email, you're using call, that's the default. And so because those interactions are intended to be either waiting for a customer to initiate something or it's outbound, but it's really not intended to be conversational, because calls are, but in a much different medium. So from our standpoint, it's how can you start dialogues, like enable outbound communication, contextualize responses, then also be ready for conversation, and then connect into cloud services. You can help a customer leverage digital solutions and services that already exist to answer their question if necessary, or hand off to a human too. So trying to find that balance.
Pat?
Smart speakers are changing consumer behaviors rather rapidly. So what we're seeing is quickly consumers found out they could ask for a song, they could ask for a timer, get the weather, and now their expectations of acquiring content by voice or getting information have changed dramatically. So what they're doing is they're asking questions like, what's the best SUV, or what's the latest treatment for MS? These behaviors are creating expectations. They don't always get an answer back, but the brands that are there that can answer those questions, and the search is enabling this today, are going to be the winners. So.
Okay.
Yeah, then I'll take it offline. I think that's a great handoff, Pat, in the sense that we have created these great expectations where now extraordinary is the new ordinary. And when we do finally have to speak to a human, we expect a lot from that human. And what we're hearing on the calls is that we're not necessarily able to serve the customer. And now within automotive, which is always a unique vertical, we find that not only do the Alexas have all this connectivity to answer all these great questions like how much is the SUV or what is the lease options, but the customers tend to trust Alexa more than a dealership employee.
So I'm going to throw in one more trend that we're seeing at Forrester, which is this shift from, if you want to look at it from a technical point of view, from session-based communication to persistent communication, and this ability of a consumer to start an interaction, a conversation with a brand, leave, come back, pick up that conversation again. Certainly the wireless carriers, for example, are seeing a lot more interactions where a customer is trying to figure out a plan, a move, or whatever, and they're distracted, they leave, they come back, and the brand has to pick up that interaction exactly where the customer left off with all of the context intact so that the customer doesn't feel like they have to start over again. So that's something that we're seeing, and obviously AI is playing a role there as well. So let's actually start to talk specifically about AI. How are you seeing brands inject AI into the customer experience they offer? And like, what are the most common use cases where they are doing that? Why don't we start with you at the end, Pat?
Good question. So we're seeing it across media, marketing, and customer service. In media, it's both to get to content quickly and easily, as well as making that content interactive, like we're doing with children's books for Scholastic. Okay. Then with marketing, big brands are extending existing campaigns in other channels, whether it's TV, radio, or outdoor, with what we call voice landing pages, so they can further engage those consumers that may be interested in what their campaign was about. And then we have immersive experiences like we're doing with National Geographic. They did a series called The Long Road Home, and they wanted to create an experience for war veterans when they're coming home to make it easier to adapt. So it's a meditation experience. It's pretty phenomenal. It's called Bravo Tango. So across a wide range, and then all of them are working with us for voice search. And that's a key point that I'll continue to harp on. Voice search is very different than web search, and it's going to change the world.
Okay. So from our standpoint, I think it's as you said, it's about enabling conversations. And so we are seeing with the customer responses and enabling more and more personalizations of, for example, Universal Music Group is one of our customers, and they have a commerce-based service, which when you first sign up, it takes you through an onboarding and an ongoing flow. You can constantly provide feedback, which tunes the personalization engine that they use to deliver recommendations. Then when you actually want to purchase, as opposed to going outside of the channel, everything happens within the messaging channel. And so the first time you want to actually purchase, it checks to see if there's a service that's already been enabled and purchasing behavior set up. If it hasn't, it'll set up a token once that's already established. On an ongoing basis, it's a simple word reply, and then you're enabling commerce without actually going to shopping cart or outside of it. And so it's leveraging the AI to connect into services and make it a more seamless, frictionless experience for a consumer.
So Uday, given what your company does, I imagine you have a viewpoint here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, see, I'll give you a viewpoint of the financial world. So because we deal in that, it's a regulatory compliant kind of a difficult world to operate conversational AI. So the thing is, what our clients are actually doing is they're taking kind of a crawl, walk, and run approach, right? So with AI, I mean, it's very important that people trust it. See, it's not like if a customer care agent does an error, it's fine. I mean, we're fine with it. But if you're talking with Alex and you ask a question and gives a wrong answer, it's a disaster for the bank. So what in our world people are doing is they're starting small with small use cases like just what's my routing number, what's my balance, stuff like that, so that they can build trust. They can make the audience comfortable with that. Then moving on to stuff like optimizations. Hey, what's the best credit card should I use? Stuff, and even then moving on to complicated things like, can you actually suggest a portfolio for me to invest in? So that's the kind of approach people are taking in our domain. And I think that's right because trust is important with AI.
So how are those financial institutions educating their customers about the capabilities and when they add new capabilities that they can do more and then more? Yeah. How is that working?
In terms of it's
educating consumers about
education doesn't work in financial world, so people don't want somebody because they think they are actually well versed with everything. They can manage money better than anyone else. So it's not about educating, but it's all about contextually in a need-based manner catering what the consumer needs. So banks are taking that approach using AI. So they're actually predicting the context, predicting the needs. Based on that, actually, they're pushing content so that it's more need-driven, user-driven rather than the bank. Yeah.
I'll step back from AI for a moment and just talk about machine learning. That is what we do so much. Again, 100 million calls a year. And really how it's changing the game is to get data that you can rely on and super quick. And now to get it from phone calls, it usually has a different context. So an example, large auto manufacturer calls us early one morning and says at 8 o'clock this morning, we're going to release a recall. And we think it's sensitive. So can you, by noon, get us all of the sentiment and the key points so we know how we need to adjust our PR campaign based on what people are saying right now? And so by noon, with some sweat and a few bodies, we were able to turn that around, which would have ordinarily taken days in surveys and customer polling. So it's the immediacy of good data is making an impact today.
So I'm also going to insert one comment here and step back from the conversational side of this and just say that AI is also showing its face inside of pretty much every element of my world, of the customer service world. As an example, you're doing call monitoring and actual understanding of the content of the call. But if you needed to build a new language model, for example, now with machine learning, it's not going to take you necessarily months. It may take you a couple of days. And so it's speeding up the development of new functionality like that the customer never sees. It's not an interaction capability, but AI is making its way into there as well.
Absolutely. Some of the things that we built 4 and 5 years ago that took us months and we were so proud of, somebody probably just did the same thing here in the audience while I was speaking. The tool set and just the crunch power of hardware today is amazing.
So that was kind of what we're seeing going on, but we're here to help the audience here. So if you wanted to say, where do you start? How do you choose the use case to start with AI? What would you say? What would you say to them? Yeah.
So we look at it across a range of use cases. There's media just to access that content, and then promotional type of use cases. Then there's search, which is really about discovering your brand. and then immersive use cases. I would say that what's going on right now, if you had no idea where to start with content that's driven by questions that you see through web search that consumers or prospects are asking, and make sure you're the brand that's answering those questions when they're asked. That would be a no-brainer starting place. There's lots of other places you can go, but if you don't know where to start there.
So Mike, you guys are doing these based on the company name, text-based conversations. What do you think about what channels you should be starting with? And are there particular systems, back-end systems, that you would want to integrate into as a starting point?
For brands or for us as a company?
No, for brands.
Yeah, I mean, I think
for our audience.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think from one of the big things, especially for brands, that this is sort of on their field of vision now, but it's still relatively new. And so for me, it's just pick a place that's actually most relevant for how to get started. I mean, we have customers that are even adding a call to action on a social channel, because and it's a channel like Instagram, which is great for you to communicate at customers, but there's not a real easy way to actually capture information, like largely driving people back to a website, and there's not, before you actually get any communication, it happens like 5 or 6 steps, and you're kind of losing that direct channel. So for us, it's how do you find a direct channel? You don't have to necessarily do any integration. Our system is set up to be able to send a message in a day, just to start that dialogue. Now, as you get deeper into it, we view how do you tie into existing workflows. So on the customer support side, if you've got an existing CS system, adding messaging to your capability, or on the CRM side, like use that as a way to initiate the conversation, and then again be ready for responses. So for us, it's just open that active channel, because in a lot of cases you don't have that. Okay.
Go ahead, Mike.
Feel like I'm out of order right now, messing everything up.
There's no order here.
I think
it's all chaos.
It is. So where to start? We get pretty idealistic here, and I say take a step back. We're all about customer experience, and that's the question we always ask. Whenever a new project comes up, a new idea, a new problem, it's like, well, what's best for the customer? And I say that because many companies just aren't there. Many companies are more focused on OpEx and how can we save some money and how can we make it more efficient for the bottom line. So know who you are as a company first, and if you're like us, do what's best for CX and be passionate about it, and those projects come quite easily.
So how did you decide? Or just can you give me a real world example where you were weighing things and you decided something wasn't necessarily a good fit?
Yeah,
for
kind of just
experience?
the opposite of us. We make money monitoring phone calls, and we actually said, how can we eliminate phone calls? Because if we can eliminate and automate these simple processes, like, and you hear what Nico was talking about today, how can we just automate an oil change appointment setting? Right? We automate that, take that off the table. Sure, that customer's happy with the oil change, but the customers that actually have problems and need to speak to a service writer, well, now they can. So that was the real win.
Okay.
I mean, as you said, right, we have to start very, very simple for sure. And it's more about the customer experience. So what we do in our case is we call our AI an empathy engine. So we created something called an empathy engine, where we actually try to holistically understand what a consumer needs even before he or she needs it. So even if it's a simple question like what's my balance and stuff like that, what we do is the customer wants a straightforward and a quick answer, and also with that they will need an insight. So you are using an AI engine, you're using a machine learning, and you're crunching a lot of data, right? The consumer wants an answer, but they also want an insight. So as a company, you have to take that into perspective, give them an answer as soon as possible, and in context to that particular question or need, give them an insight which they couldn't think of.
So all of you guys talked about customer-facing problems to start with. What about internal employee-facing issues? Is that not a good place to start? Any?
I mean, it has to be a balance, right? It cannot be one. But for the back office or whatever it is, I mean, you cannot give insights unless you understand the consumer. So you have to calibrate those needs. You have to calibrate what their expectations are, because the only thing changing faster than technology is consumer expectations, right? So you have to understand that, and you have to have your balance on the back office so that you can actually monitor that, track that, and actually fulfill that.
Okay.
Sure, there are great use cases there. These are not things that we're focused on, but if you're familiar with Alexa for Business, it's focused exactly on that issue. And it's all about convenience. How do you serve employees better? Because in that sense, employees are, the customer in a sense, right? So making it more convenient and getting directly to the answer that they're looking for, that's where the AI comes in.
Okay.
A little different answer. So we work with two-sided marketplaces, and so the traditional idea of what a consumer is, like we have customers actually using the messaging component to actually interact with people on the other side of the marketplace, the supply side. And so from that standpoint, it's been really effective because they can, it's an active channel for them that's very time sensitive, and so being able to get opportunities and feedback from people that are looking for work and trying to connect them to opportunities has been big successful for us.
Yeah, that's an area we need to go deeper, and we know that in order to create a great customer experience, you have to have a great employee experience. Our challenge is that we have 40 employees on the phone across 3,000 dealerships. It gets pretty big tasks for us to manage and to handle through education and training. So that's our next challenge that we're looking at, is how do we use AI to reach out even real time in a phone call. We can't have Alexa's not ready, our version of her isn't ready to take phone calls today, but we're getting close to where she is ready to drop little notes and ideas in the employee's ear that the customer on the other end of the line can't hear.
And we're seeing some of our customers using technologies that are quasi-real-time speech analytics, but they're actually not looking at the content of the call, but rather the tone, the prosody, whether there's crosstalk, and then giving behavioral prompts to an agent in real time, right? That's another good example of where you're making a better employee experience with the goal of actually driving better customer experience. Like that's the actual
one of
end
two,
goal.
you just need a positive tone or a negative tone just to suggest to the employee, stop, take a step back, and test for understanding with this customer. Or you should probably ask for the appointment right now. This customer is ready to do this.
Just to add on that, I mean, one of the things too that at least we always focus on is there are existing workflows and existing systems that especially the CS team uses.
Right.
So the more you can feel like you're not adding an additional interface for them to have to worry about, as opposed to folding into, you can only handle one call at a time. Now you can handle 10 different conversations at a time, but it's the interface you're already familiar with, as opposed to having to learn something new. That's a big focus for us as well.
And one of the ways that you would be able to move from, say, a concurrency of 3 to a concurrency of 5, though, is through these suggestions, AI driving suggestions in there, right? Potentially even in a text interaction, providing the text that can go directly to the customer once the agent approves it. It's almost like a human intermediated experience with a virtual agent, something like that.
Right. Yeah. From our standpoint, at least, always having the automation available, but in listening, and so, but if. And then when it makes sense, like enabling the customer the opportunity to self-serve if possible and connecting them to other systems, but then again, connecting humans and having that balance and back and forth is really important.
Okay. So the next question, I'm just going to read it from the piece of paper because the wording is amusingly awkward, but I think the content of it is really good, which is, how can companies design intelligent, automated conversations that will help customers have more productive conversations with agents? Essentially, how do we blend this AI and human interaction, where the AI is also helping with the human interaction that customer might be having? Is there a way to blend the two?
Well, the announcement today of Twilio Autopilot is really about that. It's the starting point for that anyway, where you can get the background information that's necessary and maintain really context throughout the experience. I get frustrated every time I need to call our cable company because I have to answer 6 questions before I can even talk about what my problem is. So what was announced today with Autopilot is all about that, being able to hand off to the right channel to answer the question, but retain context so you're personalizing the experience and making it better for the customer.
But how do you actually go about designing the conversational piece so that handoff is...
That's the secret sauce.
Oh, okay. Anybody have a good suggestion about how you would design those?
I mean, because text messaging is such a different medium than trying to do it from a voice standpoint. So I think in some ways we use the message to provide the context, and then we're capturing, to Pat's point, as opposed to after having to answer the same 5 questions in an IVR, the more you can know someone's name, understand and even pull back history and have that contextualized for if you're handing off to human or just enabling the AI to continue to engage in the conversation is the best way to do it. And we kind of view the world from a hybrid standpoint. So I'd say that from a text messaging standpoint, we're doing that already today.
Okay.
We know that in automotive buying, calls about a lease is always the toughest ones. They get the most, I need to call you back. The most customers calling back saying, I never got a call back with the terms of the lease. And really, that's something that's perfect for AI. And again, an Alexa-type product who's always listening in and can be prompted. And so that's the direction we're looking to go in. So when the salesperson is stuck and I don't know the terms of the lease, they can essentially say, Alexa, you've been listening, right? Yes, I have. What are the terms of the lease on the new Subaru Ascent? And then she can just give those details. And that's really what it's best at, a very direct question, right, with very specific details that I, as a salesperson, I just don't know and I'm having trouble finding. The alternative is what we hear on the phone right now, and which is you should just Google it because that's what I'm going to do. Right? So why not let's just do it together right here audibly on the phone, the 3 of us, you, me, and Alexa.
So earlier I gave the example of where you may not want to have a voice conversation be the entirety of the interaction, right? Pushing a seat map potentially to an airline customer who's upgrading and wants to select their seat. Are you looking at ways to bring in other channels and other touch points into conversational AI voice conversations?
Yeah, so now we're just talking more a passion of mine, more so than reality in automotive, but a separate point, which is, we all know about sugar CRM. I always tell everybody in automotive it's more like vinegar CRM because everyone just closes off their system in order to keep those customers. So that's a big one we have to work through. But once that's done, yeah, we would love to be able to take any audio call and plug it into what's actually happening on the screen, and so you can just interact either way. And in some ways, we've been doing this since the late 90s, hooking up voice and what you see on the screen, but now the possibilities are wonderful.
I mean, in our case, right, people use mobile banking, people use internet banking, people use SMS, I mean, people use whatnot. So we have to, I mean, not just voice is just an add-on right now, but we have to have an omni-channel strategy. I mean, of course, we are using Twilio for that, but we have to have that. But the core crux of that is the intelligence, the context, and we have to, I mean, have that with us. So irrespective of what channel the user is comfortable with, we have to attend that need. Yeah, and we definitely have to have an omni-channel strategy, irrespective if it's in financial industry or any other industry.
Okay, but an omni-channel strategy could mean that you're doing multiple different channels and potentially the customer is moving the interaction from channel to channel rather than bringing in multiple channels into that moment where, right, you could have an interaction, for example, where you're speaking to a mobile assistant, but it's also pushing touch options. Right, for if you have 5 options, nobody wants to sit and listen to Alexa read 5 options to you, right? So there's that kind of blending as well.
That's the reason why. I mean, you cannot use Alexa for a call center type of inquiry. So you have to use your medium according to the kind of usage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So crystal ball time, guys. We have one last question before we open it up to the audience. So what are your predictions for the future of customer engagement via conversational AI?
So,
and I'm going to ask all 4 of you here, so it doesn't matter who starts.
So we see a duopoly has already formed between Amazon with Alexa and Google with Google Assistant. And this is changing search forever. With voice search, you only get one choice presented to you. So if you're a brand and you're trying to optimize search on the web, you really focus mainly on Google. In the future with voice, what's happening is Amazon will never control search on Google Assistant, and Google will never control search on Alexa. So you have to have an ability to manage and optimize your search across both platforms. That's really going to be key.
Okay.
From my standpoint, I think it comes down to just understanding intent more. Like we right now, things are very direct. We'll make sure the CTA is very important and very clear to a customer. Over time, making sure that you can start to understand intent, especially in responses, is going to be really important because it's pretty straightforward. It's like, do you want this, yes or no? I mean, it still feels a little bit more IVR-ish than I want it to be. And so the more that the AI can start to look at a full message in a customer's response, just like you do when you're talking to your friend. I mean, that's the way it should evolve, to where I can understand intent because I have a history with someone I'm communicating with. It should start to evolve more in that direction.
So are you expecting that there's kind of a maturity model where there's a lot more disambiguation going on until
I
we
think
get
it
to
gets,
that point?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think you start with more straightforward use cases, and as you start to have more data and the training, it starts to get better.
Right.
The more straightforward use cases, you can identify intent earlier, and then get the consumer to the right answer, and you do it more with the AI, even though they won't know that it was AI that was used. Still having a human being when you get to them with more sophistication, so it's still that balance.
I mean, just to add to that, I mean, you're talking about intents and multiple conversations. It's not that devices like Alexa are not able to process that. They're able to do that, but I think they're not able to transmit that information back to the cloud so that information process. That's because of the speed. So with 5G and stuff like that coming, there'll be more to that. So Alexas, maybe they'll be able to process multiple voices. So stuff like that. It's going to definitely get more complicated and more frequent, because today, if you see, just less than 3% of the skills on Alexa stores are used, just 3% or just maybe 2.5%. So that's going to increase, that's going to get more complicated and more frequent. But I think when it comes to customer centricity, humans, we are all about language of the senses, right? So it's just not going to be voice. So imagine it has to be a combination of voice and visual, right? Imagine you're sitting in front of the TV and asking for something and you see options, and that kind of an experience is much more greater than just using voice text or just one visual. So I think it's going to be a hybrid in the future, and it's going to be powered by more data processing, by more increase in speeds.
Yeah, we bring in behavioral profiling a lot in our training and in applying it to phone calls, and we find that when you work with your customer at their level, if they're very to the fact and a matter of fact, then give them those quick, short answers. But if they're more interactive, then talk with them. How do you feel about this car? What are you driving today? And those conversations go on. And then once character and competence cross over, that's trust. And I'm willing, not saying I will, but I'm willing to do business. And so when we talk about these assistants as they work into automotive, we see having a few different assistants out there. And I want my assistant. I don't want to talk to your assistant. Your assistant's very rude. My assistant makes me feel good and happens to agree with me. And so we see this personalization happening over time.
All right, let's open up the floor to you guys. Do you have questions for our panelists? We have a microphone here, so please wait for the microphone because we're recording the session, and also it will help us here, up here.
Hi, thank you. My name is Epa, and I'm here from Safe Flight Auto Glass in Columbus, Ohio. I'm sure you guys have listened to the Google Assistant. It was so good that it was a little bit creepy. Are you guys concerned that the more we're trying to refine these conversational IVRs, are you concerned that it's going to be so, too real that it's becoming borderline uncomfortable for some customers?
We're all learning this as we go in, and you heard Nico talk about, the polite way, the right way to start with this is to introduce yourself as an assistant. I think ultimately we really don't care if it's an assistant or a human. Quite frankly, I don't want to speak to either. I just want the information I need or the product ordered. And so I think we're very conscious and aware of it. But we drop in little components here or there on the flip side where a machine will automatically read and write a summary of a call. So I'll back up. We do process 100 million calls. We send 8 million of those that the machines identify to humans around the world who then write a summary so that the management team within the dealership can take action, save an opportunity, or fix a customer concern. About 11% of those are written by machines. We don't really disclose it. We don't point out which ones are and which ones aren't. No one notices and no one cares. It's accurate and they're getting the information they need. And I see that flowing to the assistants as well.
So let me ask the audience, how many people are California residents? So how many of you are familiar, I don't actually know the bill name, AB something something, that was one of the last ones that Jerry Brown signed before he was, they took the pen away from him, that actually dictates that brands will disclose when you're talking to an agent under certain, a virtual agent under certain circumstances. So there's also regulatory frameworks that are going to start to pop up here. Whether that particular one will hold up on appeal, because I'm sure it's going to be challenged in court, remains to be seen. But we have, Forrester as analysts who are looking at the ethics of AI. Obviously, regulators are going to be interested, and legislators are going to be interested in this.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Again, I just take that step back and say, whether you're talking to a digital assistant or a person, right? Everything's being recorded, everything's being digitized, everything's being analyzed. AI is still very much in play. You might have an assistant talking, right, only to one party. So I think that a lot of these are kind of early knee-jerk reactions saying we're scared, we don't understand. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. We need it time to unfold still for us to learn more, but I think it's very common for us to be concerned.
Did any of you have that little frisson of fear when you saw the Google Duplex demo?
I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, technology-wise, it's very cool. But if you think in terms of the consumer, it's creepy. It's not. So I think when you're talking about customer centricity, I think the three things which are very important is transparency. So the customer has to know if it's a real agent or if it's artificial agent. So transparency is very important. Trust is very important. Intimacy is very important. These three are very important for customer centricity. So it might be great as a technology for us, but for the consumer, I think it's creepy. We have to be transparent and say, okay, this is what is happening here. At least now.
Can I share one more, and then I'll share this microphone after this. But in parallel, so we're listening to this phone call, and this guy calls up. And he talks to the service writer and says, hey, yeah, it's Mike. Is my car going to be ready today? And he's like, let me put you on hold, and I'll check to see if that part came in. He's on hold, I'm guessing talking to his wife, and start dropping F-bombs. I mean, this guy is a tiger. If my effing car's not ready, I'm going to drive your car down right through the showroom, and I'm not leaving until my car, and it's just going on. I'm like, wow, this guy is intense. The service writer comes back, Mike, and man, I'm sorry, that part is still not in. Okay, I'll call back tomorrow. Thank you. Right? He turned into a kitty cat all of a sudden. And so we sent this summary off to the service manager who read this, understands the seriousness of it. The service writer, God bless him, he thought everything was fine. The guy said, okay, I'll call you back tomorrow. He could have done better. So what do you do in that situation? It's very much like all these concerns with the digital assistants. Here's a piece of very private personal information that the gentleman didn't realize, that when your call's being recorded, it's even when you're on hold. And so the service manager was so smooth. He read this and he called up and just told a little white lie. He said, hey, I ran into the service writer in the hall. He told me your part's not in. That's not how we do business here. Can I get you a loaner or Uber you somewhere? He's like, yeah, if you could Uber me to my son's game after work, my wife can take me home from there. You got it. And obviously turned around the customer experience, but more importantly, he used that sensitive information in a responsible way. Just all he did was say, I'm just going to use this information for one purpose, and that's to put the customer first and help them with the problem. And there's no need to go any, use this information beyond that.
Go ahead, Pat.
This angst was created with the Google Duplex demo back at I/O. And what's different, people need to understand, is who initiated the interaction. That's why this angst is here. It's an assistant calling you at a restaurant. Now, it's good. I think right now Google has said they're going to make everybody know it's an assistant. But if you've got a business and this assistant brings you business, that's a good thing. So I think they're going to get over it quickly. But just in a general statement, when we're initiating the interaction with the assistant, the assistant is being reactive. But if you think of what an assistant is in real life, a good assistant isn't only reactive. A good assistant is proactive. Hey, you're going to miss your meeting. You better get going. So there are situations that I think all the platforms are a little wary of right now with this proactivity. But when you really think about what a great assistant is, it will be both proactive and reactive.
Okay. Other questions from the audience? One in the back there.
Just curious about the underlying data systems. So a lot of people talk about AI and ML, right? And it depends on the subset of data that it's being trained on to learn. So for you guys, what are some of the indicators that let you look at a data set and say, hey, I trust this to train an AI on?
Yeah, so in our case, the data that we're dealing with today is data that's available either through an API from one of our customers or that was curated specifically. So it's not an issue there, but we are starting to work with companies that are doing similar stuff to what Mike is doing with AI that is looking at, think of it, every TV show that's ever run and all their commercials, every radio show that's ever run, and using AI to find whether an advertiser actually ran an ad or to determine, what was that conversation when the on-air host dissed Tom Brady? How dare he do that? This kind of data like this is so voluminous that it's a much, much bigger issue that you're getting at. So that kind of scale brings up completely different issues.
For us, we actually working with our customers, and so it's really their data, and they're the subject matter experts. I mean, we definitely are seeing patterns of behavior across different customers, and so we're able to provide that lens going in for new customers. And then as we go on, the ability to continue to automate, it's where we'll actually analyze on their behalf and then bring opportunities to them going forward.
I think to your question, yes, I mean, we are actually taking a lot of data feeds, but the thing is, I mean, even if we are predicting something for the consumer, we are not sure yet. We might predict something right, we might not predict right. So what we are doing in our case, yes, we are aggregating a lot of data, having our predictions, but contextually also validating with the consumer himself or herself, so that there is definite validation that this is need, and according to that balance, we are then putting it out there.
And I'll say from the Forrester customer point of view, again, I'm focused on customer service. In many cases, the training set is your existing corpus of interactions that are either transcribed phone calls or existing chats. So there's not really an issue other than making sure you don't get a lot of false positives. I mean, you have to have enough data so that it actually solves the customer's problems.
And then we have an apprentice learning model to do that. So our humans and machines are constantly feeding one another, and we won't release something into production until we hit human parity of 95%, and that's how we do it.
All right, well, I just wanted to thank everybody for spending time with us, and thank you to our panelists. Really appreciate their expertise.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone.